All right, so we are pressing forward in the book of James. We are at chapter 4, verses 13 through 16, as we finished just before that last time. Verses 11 and 12, we've actually talked about a couple of months ago in another topic, but we've come our way to chapter 4, 13 through 16, as we're getting towards the end of the book of James. So that seems surprising, at least to me. And talking about this topic of if the Lord wills, if the Lord wills. Now, we looked at the last few weeks, James 1, 26 and 27, and these three categories that James lays out to work out further later in his book. He talks about controlling the tongue, and then he talks about caring for the helpless, the lowly, the widow, and the orphan especially, and then he talks about being unstained from the world, which we talked about last week. I didn't mention last week, though I meant to, that we are working as a church to continue helping the helpless, caring for the helpless in our community however we can. We've always done a great job of that here at Ohatchee, but most of that has been very quiet and behind the scenes and hasn't really involved the church in general. It's more just been the elders seeing needs and meeting needs and phenomenal and don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing ways. Very thankful for that. But we were trying to make some more opportunities for the church, for members to be involved in those kind of things. And the first thing we're doing is bringing back the food pantry, and we have some good plans for that. We plan to kick that off at the beginning of next year. So if you're able to donate to that in particular, or to bring, obviously, cans or any of those imperishables, that would be very helpful. We're trying to get it stocked between now and the new year so we can open it up to the community in the new year, and we're excited about that. So our passage today is an exciting one. Here we go. I love this passage. I've been looking forward to this passage for many reasons. We've talked about how our vast and complex God is explained to us various ways throughout the Bible, given various metaphors to explain who God is throughout the Bible. We looked a few weeks ago at God as the Father and we as His adopted children, right? So we're learning about who God is and who we are in relation to Him. And then secondly, a couple times ago, or last time, we looked at God as the husband and us as the humbly submissive bride. God as the spurned husband, as we have turned away from Him, as the husband that is gracious and the husband that is kind, but the husband that is jealous for us. And we are the humbly submissive bride, or we are to be the humbly submissive bride in response to that husband. Today, we look at a third sort of way of looking at us and God, how we relate to Him and who He is, and that is that He is God and that we are not God, that He is God and that we are not God. Now, as always, the most important thing to discover what the meaning of a text is the context, right? Context, like location is everything. You can make the Bible say whatever you want to if you take passages out of context. One of the reasons we've been preaching this way through the books of the Bible is to make sure you have abundant context as we look at various passages. And so what we've seen already in the context of the passage that we're looking at today is this same theme that's been taking us here and even follows after 4:13. Verse 6, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Verse 7, submit yourselves therefore to God. Verse 10, humble yourselves and God will exalt you. And then verse 12, right before our passage, Him saying, who are you to judge your neighbor? It is God who judges. And so we have this working up of this theme of our humility, especially in response to God, especially as we stand next to God. So let's read our passage together, chapter 4, verses 13 through 16 of James. James says, come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. Now, what is wrong with what they say? Right? It seems innocuous at first, seems harmless in the beginning. But notice the point that James is making. Today or tomorrow, they say, we will go into such a place, such and such a town, and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. And James says this attitude is arrogance. It shows that we are not humbly recognizing that we are God's creatures and not God Himself. They say first, today or tomorrow, right? As if they are in control of when they will do things. And then they say, we will go, as if they are in control of what they will do. And then they say, into such and such a town, as if they're into control of where they will go and where they will do what they will do. And then they say, and spend a year there, as if they're in control of how long they will spend any time, any place that they decide to go. And then they say, and trade, as if they're in control of what they will do when they get there. And then they even have the audacity to say, and make a profit, that is, to have control over their successes, or whether or not they'll have success, be successful, or be failures. And James says, as it is in those type of statements, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. James says this is boasting in arrogance to speak this way, to speak as if you are in control of what will happen, of what you will do, as if you're calling the shots about the decisions you'll make in your life, as if you are in charge and in control of whether or not you'll have success, that this is arrogance. This word that was translated here, arrogance, is used one other time in the New Testament. And it's in 1 John 2:16, and I think it's telling. It says, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life. That's the word. The boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. The boastful pride of life. Put on there with the lust of the eyes and the lust of the flesh, the boastful pride of life. This is the same idea that we have back here in James, the boastful pride of life. This pride that thinks you can control your life. This pride that thinks you're the one calling the shots, that you're the one running the show. God doesn't control me. I will do with my life what I please. God doesn't make the decisions how I will do things. I will do what I decide. God doesn't rule me. I rule. And it's probably important to say that in the context here, James is especially talking about wealthy people, people that have the ability to make extensive travel plans, to go somewhere for a year, and to be concerned primarily with making a profit. And I know that you don't think that you're rich, right? None of us do. But according to the definition of wealth for the entirety of mankind's history, and in basically every country that's not Western today still, you are wealthy compared to basically everyone that's ever existed. And the issue is that those people that are wealthy, that don't have to wonder where the next meal is coming from, that don't have to lean on God just for plain survival, are much more prone to this sort of pride of life, to this sort of arrogance, to think that we are in control. So it is us that need to hear this desperately. Luke chapter 12, if you got your Bibles, Luke chapter 12, verse 16 through 20, a passage we looked at extensively in our series on Luke last year. Jesus tells them a parable. Verse 16, the land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I'll tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. Verse 20, but God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? James' response to this is, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? Who are you? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. The big message we get here from James is who you are, and calls to our attention who God is. Who you are and who God is. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? You're a vapor. You're a breath. You're a mist. Three things. First, your life is short and fragile. Your life is short and fragile. This idea is throughout Scripture, right? Describing your life with words like this, with words like vapor, with words like breath. Even one place saying your life is like a soap bubble, and that it comes for a moment and then disappears very quickly. What is your life? What is your life? You ever really given consideration to that? Maybe you live 100 years? So what? Who cares? 385,000 babies are born every day that are just like you. You will live a few days and you will die. And after 100 years, just one more lifetime has gone by. Nobody will remember your name. And if they do, it will just be for some inspirational quote for their selfish ambitions to stir them up to make their 100 years meaningful, as if that's even possible. What are you but small and temporary and fragile? And if there is no God, utterly meaningless. making no real difference. If you die today, people will be sad, but the world will keep spinning. Life will go on. Your job will continue without you. Your life is short. Your life is fragile. But God is described in the Bible as eternal, not short. The opposite of short. Eternal. Immutable, which means unchanging, never changing, and self-existent. There is no greater opposite of short and fragile than eternal, unchanging, self-existent, finding existence in himself. We were driving home the other day from a place we don't normally go, and Naomi, my 5-year-old, had the audacity to tell me that we were going the wrong way, right? That I had taken the wrong turn to go home. And me, in my massively full of wisdom 32 years, turn around and say, who in the world do you think you are? You have been on the earth for 5 years. You have learned basically nothing compared to what I have learned in my 32 years on the earth. Who do you think you are? Some of you are watching and laughing at the idea that 32 years is a lot, right? Thinking, Renee, what do you know? 32 years. God has been here forever. You think your 80 years is a lot? 80 years. 90 years? Really? God has been here forever, literally, from before the beginning. Think about the way I think when Naomi says something to me and I say, who are you? When I say something and God says, who are you? Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God. Come back with me. Before creation, before the heavens and the earth, before humanity, before animals, before angels, before the universe itself existed, before any of it was spoken into being, there was only God. The only thing that existed was God, and he existed from everlasting. From everlasting, he was alone, and he didn't need earth. He didn't need humans. He didn't need angels. He was sufficient entirely in his Trinitarian self. It was his sovereign decision alone to create, not out of any necessity on his part. God was under no obligation, no necessity to create. If God needed anything, it would have existed with him from eternity past along with him. God is timeless, before time, outside of time. Even to say before the beginning is a time word because that's the only way we can understand things, but it stretches our mind beyond comprehension to think that God never had a beginning, that simply God was always here. But that's the message of the Bible, that God was always here and always will be. Psalm 93 verse 2, your throne is established from of old, you are from everlasting. Or Psalm 90, verse 2, before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the universe, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. God is the only being, in fact, that has life in himself, that is not sustained by something else. Everything else in the universe is sustained only by God, is given life, is given breath only by God, only exists because we came from God. Everything that exists came out of God. Everything. God is the only sort of thing that can exist on his own. The uncaused cause, the uncreated creator. And God is absolutely unchangeable, unalterable. He cannot increase and cannot decrease. He does not learn things. He has known everything from the beginning. Malachi 3:6, for I, the Lord, do not change. Or earlier in James chapter 1, verse 17, says, every good thing comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. We are ever changing, constantly changing. And yet our God never changes, has never changed, and will never change. The God who was there in the beginning, who created it all ex nihilo from nothing, the God who will be there in the end in flaming fire, is the exact same God, without difference, as the God who meets us here this morning. As the God who meets you when you come to him in prayer, as the God who walks with you every step of your day and every difficulty you face. He does not have good days and bad days. He does not have good moods and bad moods. He is a fortress, a rock, a refuge, and is absolutely immovable. The absolute opposite of short is God. The absolute opposite of fragile is God. When we contemplate God, we stand as moths on the surface of the sun, realizing that we are nothing. Spurgeon said, our pride must be drowned in the contemplation of the infinity of God. Who are you and who is God? Secondly, you don't know, he says, what tomorrow will bring. Proverbs 21:7. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you don't know what a day has coming for you, what a day may bring forth. If there's anything that we know very clearly, it's that we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. God, however, knows every tomorrow. Job 37, the wondrous works of him who is perfect in knowledge. That is, he knows everything perfectly. Psalm 147, he determines the number of the stars. He gives to all of them their names. Great is our Lord and abundant in power. His understanding is beyond measure. God never learns anything. God knows everything from eternity past and from eternity to eternity future. Nothing new ever enters the mind of God. Nothing catches him off guard. He knows what you will say before you say it, what you will think before you think it, what you do before you do it. He never misreads a situation. He knows every intention of every heart, every prayer prayed at every moment around the world. He hears perfectly. And he knows the best answer for every prayer. God literally takes everything into account down to every smallest detail. And what's so hard to imagine is that everything God knows, God has known from the foundation of the world. That is, he knows everything perfectly and knows everything immediately. He knows it all simultaneously in a way that blows my mind. Isaiah 46, I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things not yet done. What sets God apart from us, what makes God like no other, is that he knows the end from the beginning, that he declares the end from the very beginning. God doesn't have to go through various thoughts like we do. Right? Our train of thought moves from one item to the other. God knows all things simultaneously. Romans 11:33 and following. Oh, the depth of the riches and the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond finding out. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who became his counselor? For from him and through him and to him are all. Who has known the mind of the Lord? Who has been his counselor? That is, who has told God something he doesn't know already? Who has counseled God about what he should do? No one, because God knows all things and is constantly doing all things, the right things. And I love the way it ends. For from God, everything comes. And through God, everything now exists. And to the glory of God is the goal of all things. That is everything. God knows all and is all and sustains all. And then thirdly, James says, you are not in control. You are not in control. If there's anything you learn from going from a child to an adult, you learn that you're not in control. When you're a child, you think, well, when I'm an adult, I'll be in control. Then I'll get to decide. And then you just laugh when you become an adult and realize that you're not in any sense control. But God is in absolute and total control. Ephesians 1:11, having been predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things, according to the counsel of his will. Proverbs 21:1, the king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will. Proverbs 16:33, the dice is cast into the lap. It may seem like it's chance, but it's every decision is from the Lord. Even the decision of the dice is from the Lord. Matthew 10:29, not one sparrow will fall to the ground apart from your Father. Not one bird dies unless God tells it to, allows it to. Or as Miss Betty Carroll always said, Psalm 115:3, our God is in heaven and he does as he pleases. Or Isaiah 46 verse 10 again, declaring the end from the beginning, saying, my counsel shall stand and I will accomplish all my purpose. There are no accidents. There are no random occurrences. The Lord reigns today everywhere, in every heart, in every moment. A.W. Pink says it well, says it like this: God always does as he pleases, when he pleases, where he pleases, with whom he pleases. Sproul says there are no rogue molecules in the universe, right? There is not one molecule in the universe that is going rogue against what God intends for it. Every molecule bows to its king. What a comfort it is to know that the devil is not in charge. What a comfort to know that Washington, at any given time, regardless of who the president is, was, or will be, is not in charge. What a comfort to know that your boss is not in charge. That ultimately God is the one in charge. Romans 8:28 is in the Bible. God works all things together to good for those who love the Lord and are called according to that God works all things together for good. If it wasn't true that God was in absolute control, then that verse would have to say God will do his best. God will do what he can. But it doesn't say that. It says God works all things together for good for those who love the Lord. You can trust a God like this. You don't want a God who is putting his finger in the air to see which way the wind is blowing and then doing his best to make it work out the way that he wants it to. You want a God that is a rock, that is a mighty fortress, a God that's in control to carry out his purpose for his glory and for the good of his people. And so James calls our attention to the idea of Psalm 8:4. What is man that you are mindful of him? Who do you think that you are? Or Acts 17:24. God is not served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And so James says, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. God is wholly other, entirely different. James says, who do you think you are? Your life is short and fragile. You don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. You are not in control. So you should be saying, if the Lord wills. And it's not about those words, or it's not about vocalizing those words. It's about the attitude that says, if the Lord wills for me to do this, it'll happen. If the Lord wills for this to occur, it'll occur. If the Lord decides he wants me to do this, then I will do it. It's an attitude that we've been talking about in this context of absolute humility and submission to the will of God. If the Lord wills. And notice what it says. You ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live. If the Lord doesn't will for you to take another breath, you won't. If you sit and listen to this and take another breath, it's because the Lord has willed for that to occur. If the Lord wills, we will live, much less do this or that. Life is totally in God's hand. Your every beat of your heart is because God makes it beat. Every breath of your lungs, the Lord decides. He created you. He sustains you. He decided the day you'd be born. He will decide the day that you die. Every morning, every evening, every turn of the steering wheel, every business decision is a gift from God. Humble yourselves. You don't govern your life. God does. You are but a mist. God is everlasting. You don't know tomorrow. God knows every day that has ever been and will ever be. God is in absolute control. And again, this is the God that you want. This is the God that you want. The only God that offers anchored, immovable, unexplainable peace. You can have no peace if God is not in control. You can have no peace if God does not know tomorrow. You can have absolute peace that passes all understanding because he is and because he does, because he's on the throne, because he is my rock and my fortress and my refuge. I love you, church. Have peace in the Lamb that was slain before anything happened, before the foundation of the world, for your joy in his glory. Talk to you soon.